This video is about lesson 1.2, learning outcome number 3, distinguishing between discrete and continuous data. So we talked about quantitative data and categorical data in the last video in our last learning outcome. We were trying to distinguish between something that was numerical, essentially, and something that was really about labels, about grouping things, and not really about a number. Well, not categorical data, but the quantitative data. The quantitative data can be subdivided even further into what are called discrete data and continuous data. So discrete data are data values that are quantitative, for which the number of values is finite or countable. So if I look at the fruit in my fruit bowl, if there are 3 apples in the bowl, well, that's countable. There's a countable number of apples. Even if I tried to count all of the grains of sand on a beach, I would be there for a really long time, but I could count them because I just pick one up at a time. 1 grain of sand, 2 grain of sand, 3 grain of sand. I might be there for a long time, but it's countable. That's discrete data. Now, continuous data or continuous numerical data is data that is quantitative, but it's a number in a range, an infinite range of values. So it comes from an infinite range of quantitative values. As a math teacher, I tend to think of continuous numerical data in terms of the number of points on a line. If I were to try to count all of the points on the line and try to count them, there are always gonna be little gaps. I'm always gonna miss some, and then I'll go back through and I'll try to count them again, and I'll still miss some, and I'll keep missing some every single time I try to count them, because that line is continuous. If I'm talking about all of the values between 1 and 100, it's not that there are 99 values, not if I'm thinking of it as a continuum of values. Like if you could have 99.5 or 99.75 or, pi or e or the square root of 17. If you're talking about every single real number between 0 and 100, that is a continuum of values. So if you're talking about numerical data that comes from a continuum of values, that's called continuous data. So I think about like anytime I measure volume or we measure area, volumes are continuous, areas are continuous. But if something is countable, even if you have a lot of it, like the grains of sand that I was talking about, that's discrete. So discrete data are data sets that you can count, and continuous data, there's just infinitely many possibilities. We're talking about a number on a continuum. So let's do a couple of examples. So here's our first example. The number of tosses of a coin before it gets tails. Is that discrete data or continuous data? Well, if I was just tossing a coin and then tossing a coin and then tossing a coin and then waiting to get tails, well, I believe that would be discrete data. I hope you said discrete data. If I counted the number of tosses, I'm never going to get 2.5 tosses. I'm always going to get 1 toss or 2 tosses or 3 tosses. Or maybe it'll take a really long time. Maybe I have 100 tosses. Maybe I've got a weighted coin or something like that. But in any case, it's definitely discrete. It's a countable number of tosses. Since we can't have part of a toss, that's discrete data. Also, whenever we talk about numbers of people who believe a certain thing, that's discrete data as well, because we can't have half a person. We can't have a part of a person. You either have a whole person there or you don't. So that's discrete data. Continuous data, again, extends over a range of values. So let's look at this next example. It says the lengths of distances from 0 centimeters to 12 centimeters. Well, there are lots of distances between 0 and 12 centimeters. There are infinitely many possibilities between 0 and 12. So that is continuous quantitative data. Now, if you're dealing with data that is categorical, then it is neither discrete nor continuous. So if you talk about male versus female, if you talk about eye color, you talk about, and sometimes people would say, oh, well, color, there is a range of colors. my point is that most of the time when we're talking about those things, we're just labeling. We're saying this is one category, this is another category, this is another category, and it has nothing to do with numbers. Discrete data are numbers. It's some number that you count to. And continuous quantitative data, those are numbers that come from a range of numbers. So if you're dealing with categorical data, it's neither discrete nor continuous.